about Stasis Theory. And full disclosure, Mr. Dam is sitting holding the camera right now. So if you see me, it looks like I'm talking to somebody, it's because I'm talking to him. But I'm going through this with him and with you at the same time. Now, Stasis Theory is one of the most helpful tools of invention, and I love going through this with students. It really enables you, when you understand what you do with Stasis Theory, how it works, it enables you as a student to think through issues thoroughly and develop arguments then based on that. I would encourage you to put it into practice just in every class, every paper that you write, any time that you have to argue for anything. It is helpful in the beginning to take and make a worksheet for yourself and work through the issues of stasis. It will enable you to have something to say. The way Stasis Theory works, it's the background. I provide you with background, but it's the thinking that goes into a piece of discourse. It will be, or it should be, invisible when your discourse is completed. It should not be. Your audience shouldn't say, oh yeah, he's just going through the points of stasis, because that's not really the purpose of it. The purpose is to teach you to think through the issue thoroughly. Stasis theory is a systematic way of asking questions about an issue. It includes a prescribed set of questions and answers that can be applied to any rhetorical situation at all, altogether. Stasis theory has been used since the time of Aristotle, around 400 BC. It was codified by Hermogenes in the 2nd century BC, and most of what he wrote about it has been lost, but shows up and is referenced quite often by Quintilian and Cicero and other Roman rhetoricians. The plural form is stasis. If I can write that up here on the board. Stasis, which is really just refers to questions or issues. Stasis comes from the Greek word that means a stand. The Latin form is status, or status, or constitutio. The purpose of stasis theory is to help you, as a rhetor, to identify where the issue lies. Where is the conflict? Where is the debate? And when you've identified that, then you know where you need to focus your attack. If you're familiar with the story, the Battle of Gettysburg, then you know Lee made some classic blunders in that battle, and the biggest one was that he believed on the 3rd day of the battle that the weak point of the Northern Army, the Army of the North, was their center, and did not realize that they had gathered. He didn't have the intelligence. He was missing Stonewall. Jeb Stuart was not there, and not to give a history lesson here, but he didn't have the intelligence that would have told him that the Northern Army had amassed all their force in the center. So he sent Pickett on his famous charge, and they died. Pickett's entire unit was destroyed in that battle. He misidentified. He thought their weakness, he thought their strength was their weakness, and so he focused his assault there and lost the battle because of that. Similarly, in rhetoric, we're trying to find where the conflict is and also identify where our opponent's weak points are. And stasis theory helps us to be able to do that. So it is a systematic way of asking questions, thinking through the issue, so that you can identify where the point of conflict is, where the debate lies, and you can know where you need to focus your attack as well. The purpose of stasis theory then is to identify where that issue lies. Sharon Crowley in her textbook on rhetoric said that determining the point of disagreement is an obvious starting place for rhetorical invention. A stasis then is the point where you, the rhetor, take your stand. It's the place where you take your stand. It helps you to identify your positions and the reason why you take those positions. And also to find where your positions come into conflict with the positions of your opponents. That's the point of it. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, in this video and possibly the next one, we're going to just go through the questions of stasis, what they are, how we approach it. Then we're going to go back and apply those questions to a particular issue. So it'll be a couple of videos, but I hope this will be a great help to you. When you're finished watching, there will be, if you send me a request, I will send you all the notes for this so that you can have them. That way you can take notes yourself, but then you'll have my notes that will be a help to you as well in thinking these issues through. Okay, so we've divided this up into 4 steps. We have 3 steps on this side of the board, and then we'll turn the board around and show you the 4th step in thinking through an issue. The first thing we want to do is, and step 1 is to decide whether the issue is a thesis or a hypothesis. All right, so whether to formulate the question as a thesis or a hypothesis. The difference really is a hypothesis is a specific issue, deals with specific people, where a thesis is a general issue, not dealing with any specific person. So a hypothesis would ask, a thesis would ask, should one marry? Should one vote? Should one drive a car? Should one exercise? Should one play chess? Should one read Aristotle? All right? It's asking that question about just people in general. Hypothesis would ask it more of a specific person or a specific group. Should Luke marry? Should 16-year-olds marry? Should 18-year-olds vote? Should women vote? Should non-citizens vote? Should Puerto Ricans vote? It would be more specific. Should 60-year-olds marry? That kind of thing. So that's the difference on there. The first step. So you decide first whether it's a thesis or hypothesis. It should be fairly obvious to you given the question, but there certainly are all kinds of different issues that will come up in rhetoric. The second step is if you decide to treat the question generally, if you're treating it as a thesis, then you're going to ask whether it should be treated or stated theoretically or practically. Theoretical questions ask why people behave the way they do. Really, theoretical questions ask why. They investigate actual human behavior and the reasons behind it. Theoretical would examine the questions, the reasons behind human behavior. Practical questions examine actual human behavior. So I mixed that up. Okay, so let me state that again. The theoretical question asks why. The practical question asks what. Theoretical question, why do people do what they do? The practical question asks, what do people do? So why do people behave the way they do? Where a practical question examines actual human behavior. General issues divide between the theoretical and the practical. Theoretical questions are questions of knowledge. Practical questions are questions of action. The practical question asks whether it should be done or what should be done. The theoretical question asks why it should be done. All right? Step number 3. And this is where we get into the meat of stasis theory. The first two really just help us to examine what kind of question we're asking. Now we're going to examine the issue itself. So step number 3, we're going to decide which of the 4 stases best describes the point at issue in the rhetorical situation at hand. There are 4 categories of questions of stasis. And then if you think of it kind of like a Russian doll, you take apart the outer shell, and then there's another of the same doll in a smaller form, and you keep opening it up and opening it up. That's kind of what stasis theory is. It's like a Russian doll. So there are 4 questions of stasis: conjecture, definition, quality, procedure. For each of these questions of stasis, there are a set of questions that go with them, with the exception of procedure. Procedure only asks 1 question. All right, so there are 3 or 4, depending on how you look at it, a handful of questions of conjecture, a handful of questions of definition, of quality, but not of procedure. Okay? Now I'm going to try to talk you through this here and explain what we're doing. But on this 3rd step, we're deciding which of these 4 broader categories of question are the most relevant to the question at hand. Okay? So, on the question of whether one should marry or not, we're asking, is this a question of conjecture? Are we asking whether it exists or not? Did it happen or not? Does it happen or not? Is there something here to talk about? That's what the question of conjecture answers. It deals with the actual existence. So if we're examining should one marry, we're asking, does marriage exist? Does it happen? Okay? Then we have the question of definition. What is it exactly? If we're trying to determine whether the question at hand is a question of definition. All right? So, when we ask, should one marry, then if it's a question of definition, we're going to say, what is it exactly? Exactly what is marriage? And we're going to ask a set of questions related to that to help us determine whether that's where the issue lies. When we're trying to answer whether, in general, people should marry, we're going to ask what marriage is. And then, but in this step, we're trying to decide, is that where the issue lies? Is the controversy, is the point of conflict at the question of definition, at the question of what marriage is? All right? The 3rd question of stasis is quality. Quality deals with right and wrong, the morality of it. Is it good or bad? Is it right or wrong? Is it honorable or dishonorable? Those are some of the questions that we ask when we're examining the question in light of quality. All right, so again, taking our issue, should one marry, in this step, we're just trying to decide which one of these best describes the issue at hand. So if we're trying to examine whether or not people should get married, then we would ask, okay, is this primarily a question of quality? Is that what we want to know, whether it's right or wrong? All right, then the last one is procedure. What should we do? What course of action should we take? Should it be regulated? Should changes be made, or should something be done about it? That's kind of what the questions of procedure are asking. And again, to reiterate here, on this step, we're not asking the questions specifically. So in other words, if I can explain it to you, we're not going to try to answer all these questions. We're just trying to identify where the point of conflict is. So is it at procedure? Okay? If the point of conflict is at conjecture, then we're, in our discourse, our emphasis, our focus is going to be on the actual existence of marriage itself. Okay? If the main conflict is over the definition of marriage, then what our discourse needs to do is to identify what marriage is and prove that. Prove our definition. If it's a question of quality, then we're looking at should one marry in the light of whether it's right or wrong. That seems to be that's probably more or closer to where the issue lies when we're asking whether one should marry. But we could also argue that it's a question of procedure because we're asking there, what should we do? What should be done about it? Is there something, should it be regulated? Should we enact certain policies and procedures and so on for it? We'll come back through it and discuss in light of that question, should one marry? That will be our topic as we work through it, and I'll give you an example of how to work through it based on that. Okay, pause the video. All right. Oh, wait. Did you start it? Sorry about that. Just a little technological difficulty there. So, here's the fourth step, and this is an expanded version of the questions. In the third step, we simply try to identify which of the four stasis is the main area in dispute. Okay? In the fourth step, we take each one of these questions of stasis and we ask these questions and seek to answer them. And so this time we're not, okay, for example, on the question, should one marry, we said probably it's a question of quality. But we're going to answer all these questions because it's going to help us think through the issue entirely. We'll pay careful attention here if we've identified this as the point of contact with our enemy, then we would especially focus on this in our discourse. But remember, not everything that you use here will go into your discourse, but it does though, because it provides you background in your thinking. It helps you to think through the issue. So these questions, this is stasis theory right here. These are the questions. I've been walking you up to it. Now you have the full questions in front of you. The first set of questions are the questions of conjecture. Is there an act to be considered? We're going to ask this set of questions right here. Does it exist? How widespread is its use? Is it confined to a few small groups of people, or does it permeate the general culture? All right? That's the first question of conjecture. All right? Let me back up because I do want to be clearer on this. Conjecture, definition, quality, and procedure are the four questions of stasis. These are the questions of conjecture right here. Okay? Does it exist? How did it begin? What causes it? Can it be changed? Those are the questions of conjecture. So So as you can see, what we're doing here is thoroughly examining the existence of the subject. So on the question of marriage, then we're going back and examining the foundations of marriage itself. Why would that be important? Well, of course it's relevant. The foundation of anything, how it began, is relevant to our understanding of it today. We need to think that part of it through when we're asking whether one should marry or not in this day and age. I think because of the current marriage controversies, the recent acceptance of gay marriage, at the same time that the gay marriage ruling came through, the courts also ruled, at least for Utah, that polygamous marriages were also legal. So at least in our area, polygamy is legal. I don't know if that's true for the rest of the country. I think probably would have to be tested in their general courts, but eventually I'm sure it will be. And then we're going to end up with all kinds of things. So if we're asking that question, we need to examine the foundations of it. That's what conjecture does. It examines the existence. How did it come into existence? That's what it's asking. All right? Then definition. The questions of definition are, first of all, what kind of thing is it? That would refer to kind of the genus of it. To what larger class of things does it belong? A triangle, for instance, the genus of triangle is a figure. Let's see. There are other genuses. That a doe is of the genus deer. A doe is a female deer, so genus would be deer. A boy is a male child, so the genus would be child. Just thinking off the top of my head, a computer, the genus of computer, it would belong to the larger class of devices or machines. So that would, as we think through the definition, we're asking about the genus. What kind of thing is it? To what larger class of things does it belong? Then the next question of definition, what distinguishes it from other members of its class? Take boy again. A boy is a male child. Male is what distinguishes boy from other children. A girl is a female child. Okay? A doe is a female deer. That female distinguishes a doe from other deer. A buck would be a male deer. A kitten is a baby cat. Baby distinguishes it from other cats. And a beagle is a certain kind of dog, but it would be distinguished from other species of dogs like border collies or German shepherds or wiener dogs or chihuahuas or Mexican water rats or whatever other kinds of dogs there are out there. And you would think through what are the distinguishing features, distinguishing qualities. So what makes it different from other members of its class? And then what are its parts? You also think about that under definition. What are the various parts that make it up? Make it what it is. Again, what definition does as a stasis, definition forces you to think through the issue thoroughly so you know exactly what it is you're talking about. That's really important. One of the biggest mistakes people make in debate is failing to define terms. Defining terms is the most important part of a debate. Believe it or not, the motto is, He who defines wins. We see in our culture a rush to define moral issues with certain terms and terminology. Think of abortion. One side calls themselves pro-choice. The other side calls themselves pro-life. This is how we define. And he who defines wins. So the pro-choice side is attempting to win the argument by couching the procedure in certain terms. And the pro-life side as well. That's why the gay rights advocates like to speak of marriage equality. They're trying to define terms. I believe when Obamacare was being debated, that Sarah Palin, I believe it was Sarah Palin who referred to death panels. That actually, when someone reached a certain age, that they would go before a panel to determine whether or not it was worth it to try to fix them. If they were, what she was saying is that it would be a death panel. This panel of doctors would decide whether you get to live or die based on that. And that is where we're headed. But calling it death panels is defining it. You're able to do that when you've thought it through thoroughly. And so that's the point here with this, is asking what kind of thing is it. Now quality, we divide the questions of quality into two categories. We consider it simply, and then we consider it comparatively. So we consider it alone, all by itself, just to ask, is it good or not good? Is it right or wrong? Is it honorable or dishonorable? That's the list of questions here. Is it good or bad? Should it be sought or avoided? Is it right or wrong? Is it honorable or dishonorable? We consider the ethics of that thing alone. All right, then we come over here and we consider it comparatively. So compared to other similar things. We go back to here to definition. What distinguishes it from other members of its class? Well, you're recognizing then what the other members of its class are and comparing it to other species of the same genus. And we ask then, is it better or worse than something else? Is it more or less desirable than something else? Is it more or less honorable than something else? Those are the questions of quality. Now, we said on the question of marriage, should one marry, that it seemed like it was more a question of quality. So, even though we're answering all of these, we recognize that this is where the real issue is. All right, so we're going to want to be very careful. Not that we don't want to be careful or we want to be careless on any of these others, but we know that this is where we're going to be arguing right here. This is where the debate will take place. So we want to be especially careful right here. We also have the question of procedure, and I said that it could actually, that the question of whether one should marry or not could actually be a question of procedure. What should be done about it? Interesting thing is that on that question, that really is the only question that we're asking. Should this act be submitted to a formal procedure? What changes to the current policies should be made? What should be done about it? How can this policy be implemented? All those things are questions that we would ask about procedure. Again, thinking it through. Okay, that's all for this. We'll come back and think this through in more detail, in more depth.